1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
And that is the crack of the bat, the smack of the leather, and we're off. This is episode. I even lost what track.
Episode 47.
47. So you are so Charles. You are so organized. With just, I mean, you've created this trilogy of books. Charles Avison, the author of Detroit, City of Champions, and he's relating to me these stories. And you're just so organized and well done. I just come in and I'm usually have a beer or two into things.
Well, it takes pretty much spend all day organizing it all. So this is like they're just
47,
time
47,
and effort.
47,
yeah.
47. So, but so we're talking about just the amazing year in Detroit with the Tigers, the Lions, and the Red Wings, and then the astounding year that Joe Louis had individually, not winning the championship.
Well, yeah, we said that like
everything but
9 episodes ago. That
everything
we're talking about right now, every one of these episodes with Joe Louis for this entire segment, we are building up towards
him not winning.
Well,
spoiler alert, not getting the chance.
Not getting the chance at the heavyweight championships in 1935. But in beginning with that knowledge in mind that there's a handicap on Joe Louis, that he didn't win the heavyweight championship in 1935.
Right.
And despite that fact, we are building towards the point where we're going to make a case for the final, sort of segment of this Joe Louis portion,
not a hard
that
case
this was
make.
the greatest individual season in the history of American sport by any athlete in American sport history. And so, like I say, so the handicap is that most of the times if you're going to have somebody that is, there's a lot of great individual seasons in American sport history. And almost every single one of them, is framed around the idea that player helped their team or themselves win a championship in that particular year. So the handicap we're beginning with Joe is that he did not win the heavyweight championship in 1935. And despite that fact, his season is going to be my contention and your contention, I'm assuming.
I'm in. My hat's in the ring.
This was the greatest individual season, regardless of the fact that he didn't win the heavyweight championship in 1935. So
amazing. So
that's what we're building towards.
This is the 10th episode that we've been talking about Joe, the history of boxing.
We started with the history of boxing with the first black heavyweight champion with Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson setting the stage for even more of a challenge.
Exactly. Yeah. Joe had to overcome the damage that shenanigans. Jack Johnson left a bad taste.
He was a renegade. He was
absolutely. He would fit in well with today's era.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
But in that era, it was a scandal. It was basically in their we're terming out scandalous thing, and he created more of an obstacle for future black fighters to get that opportunity at the championship again.
So that, and then Joe's beginnings.
We talked about the
Joe's
beginnings
and the black bottom, and then coming up through Detroit.
How he was the last he's a classic log cabin to the White House type of guy, where the quintessential American dream, which is that he came from literally the bottom. I mean, it would be hard to find anyone who started out with more of a disadvantage from coming from a lower spectrum of American society than Joe Louis. I mean, he was at you like I say, it'd be hard to find anyone. I mean, the 8th of 9 children. Yeah. Born in the Buckaloo in the foothills of the Buckaloo Mountains of Alabama.
Is it nothing? Is it violin lessons or is it boxing lessons?
Yeah, like he Yeah, exactly.
And then through the Golden Gloves.
Yeah, then he starts to coming on. He finds that boxing is about not only is that the only thing he's really good at, but he's great at it. And he's great at knocking people out. And there was all these continually escalating challenges he had to face. And one of the final hurdles that his own trainer had to break him out of, Jack Blackburn. Was the fact that he was not a natural-born killer inside the ring. That he was such a genuine, nice guy that he didn't want to he lacked that sort of killer instinct that was going to put his opponent away.
Right.
In fact, one of the things we haven't mentioned was there was actually a moment where Joe. I forgot which fight it was, but there was a fight. I believe he was a professional at this point, where that he turned his back on an opponent and walked back to the corner, and the guy was not. The guy got back up, but he didn't come after. He didn't like come after Joe, but he was vulnerable, massively vulnerable at that moment.
Sure.
And his trainer actually said to him, don't ever do that again.
Right.
And so, there's those kind of things that he had to learn that, you can't turn your back because that other guy is looking to, knock you out. You can't, you're too nice of a guy. You trust these people so much. You have to use your fists all the time. Your fists have to be your referee because you're not going to get a break, And
so his first heavyweight chance we talked about last time with Primo.
Yes, well, he'd been through the wars already. He was already, he was 20-0. He'd fought 23 fights at that point. He did 19 knockouts up to this point. Out of the, when he beat Primo Carnera, his official record was 21-0, even though he had 24 wins because 3 of them we talked about were exhibition knockouts. But yeah, he's gone through all these different fighters, but his first real big challenge was Primo Carnera, which we spent a great deal of time talking about last episode. His first really big fight was Primo Carnera, former heavyweight champion, giant of a man. They call him the Man Mountain from Italia. Just an absolute, just gigantic human being. And honestly, one of my favorite, if not my very favorite fights of all time. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah. I watched it after
Did you?
that.
Yeah. And you can see Primo is just an absolute beast of a human being, and he never stops swinging he never stops coming after Joe, even though Joe was just cutting him to pieces.
Pummeled him.
But he just never stops. I mean, the one wrong move by Joe, and if Primo connects with him, he's going down. And so...
as we were walking through those, I was putting up different images, and because I was talking about Joe not winning the championship, and yet so revered, because ultimately he did.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But so revered in Detroit, and there's the fist, the statue.
There's a fist, a statue.
I had the fist up there, and Rolanda was like, "Why do you have the picture of the fist up there? It's showing a lot of violence. I don't like it." I don't think that the fist represents violence in any way.
No,
the statue.
Yeah.
It was. It's
I actually have the description
Joe's
right here in my first
in
book. I've got the official.
Power.
You want to know the official definition of it?
So what's the definition of the fist? Because a lot of people misinterpret that fist in Detroit, and people. So what was the official?
Hold on 1 second. I got to find it. It's in my first
definition
book
of the purpose behind that and the symbolism behind that. We talked to because I've had the privilege of meeting his son and hanging out with him a few times, Joe Jr. the Third, and he's a good lad, man. He's a good lad. We're the same age. He's a good guy, but
so the synopsis.
It was interesting, JoJo talking about it, and because we've had him on. If you go back and listen to us talking to JoJo, but what's the synopsis of? You got a picture of the fist there.
This is sort of the official. There's a little bit more to it. This is like
in
a really short.
But I was just like how revered he is in the city, because there's no, there's Steve Eiserman Boulevard, there's Aretha Franklin. People name his streets after people, but there's not a whole lot of statues in Detroit.
So when I wrote this, it was back in 2009, and there was a couple different sources that I read to get this, so I kind of cobbled up my own definition based on the stuff that I read, like the official terminology for it. So the sculpture in downtown Detroit was commissioned by a $350,000 grant from Sports Illustrated in 1986. It is a 24-foot-long arm suspended by a 24-foot-tall pyramid framework. So 24-foot-long arm supported by 24-foot-tall pyramid framework created by Robert Graham. It represents Joe Louis's power both inside and outside the ring. That was what I got.
So it's the power in and out of the ring.
Inside and outside. So that's why the pyramid
just empowering
is swinging
for him and empowering for
be outside the ring.
People that were counting on him.
Well, we're gonna touch on
supported.
Yeah, he was a hero. This is the first legit universal African American hero.
Right.
In America, and we're gonna see one of the benefits of Joe today of his impact. We're gonna talk about how his impact on Jesse Owens going into the 1936 Olympics.
But
that's what I'm saying. Inside and outside the ring, it wasn't just he wasn't just a self-aggrandizing. This was boxing. It was him to make a bunch of money. Joe was he was in his mind unexpectedly thrust into a situation which originally he started boxing just to make some meal vouchers and some extra money.
Right.
And then we showed how his fights, how much money he made from each of these fights is an important component, because when you look at the chart, that his first fight he makes $50,
right,
and now he's entering by Primo Carnera. He's making $60,000 a fight,
and these are into today dollars. They're
incredible
into the millions.
Yeah.
And
so incredible sums of money, and there's sums of money he probably never dreamed of. But that wasn't where it ended. It wasn't like he just made a bunch of money and then he just had the biggest house in Detroit.
No.
We're gonna see there's so many examples. Like by the end of his life he was basically broke. And a lot of the reasons why is he would given away so much money over the course of his career. Well, exactly.
No,
before he paid his taxes.
JoJo and I talked about that. It was like my dad was too damn generous.
Exactly. And so he was too generous.
Yeah.
And that's what's so interesting is that there's all these examples. Like there's a quote, we're going to bring it up in a couple shows from now. But there's one thing where he's given away these little envelopes with 50 cents in each envelope, and each envelope was a bank account started at a local bank. They had already been started with 50 cents on the account, and he was handing out envelopes where the kid could, it started him a bank account. It's something that these kids had never had.
Yeah.
A bank account with 50 cents in there, and they're like, well, if you make it grow, they're like two little acorns, you start putting money in it.
Yep.
So it got their feet wet in the banking system. So it was a million things like that. That was the smallest of the things that he did.
Yep.
And that's what I'm saying is that he wasn't, inside and outside the ring with that fist. He was more than just a guy that was just a fist.
Yeah.
He was more than just a guy inside the ring.
Right.
And he found himself in this role completely unexpectedly. But I call him a child of destiny.
Because people didn't know, because people probably met him or became aware of him as a heavyweight.
Sure.
And did not know the Joe as the amateur in the Golden Gloves.
Yes.
And that Joe was not timid is not the right word.
But he was a shy guy.
He was a little softer.
Very uneducated.
It was a little softer Joe.
Yeah.
But he had to be a beast because on the heavyweight scale, he was on the lower end of heavyweights.
Yeah, he fought as a light heavyweight all the way up through his entire amateur career. He never fought as a heavy in his amateur career.
So
it was unexpected for him to jump to when he first went pro to go from light heavy to heavy.
To
he
heavy.
had to put on weight in order to get up to that weight class. And then he was on the light end of the heavies.
Right.
So every guy he faced, like the Carnera, who's 6'6", 265,
compared to him.
He was like a couple pounds over the heavyweight limit, and these other guys are a bunch of monsters he's got to face. So, but the real money was in the heavyweight class. It wasn't light heavy. So it was, if you want to draw any attention, just as like today, the real, everybody looks at who's the heavyweight champ, the biggest and baddest of them all. So, so that's what I mean. So, so you look at it and go, he was the most unlikely champion. He was somebody that had no idea that he would ever dream of being thrust into a role as like a role model and as a hero to the entire, to all of Black America and to people across the entire world. But then you sit there and say it was unlikely, it was the most unexpected and all these different things. But once you start to really see it all come together, you start looking and like, there couldn't have been a more perfect person.
Sure.
He was exactly that. He was humble. He was like, kind of a, he was like, God-fearing, like, respected his mother and all the, like the classic, all the things that like, you like a perfect hero needs to be.
Right.
And so it's unexpected. It may have been certainly unexpected, but that's why I look at him as almost like a child of destiny. Like he was the perfect person to fill this model.
Absolutely unlikely, and yet the perfect person. So he fought Primo, beat Primo pretty handily. It wasn't a walk in the park. You saw the pictures of Joe. We had some pictures of Joe afterwards, and he's smiling, and his face is bruised up.
Sure.
Post-fight, do I have that post-fight picture?
So I want to bring. So that's where we're at right now. So we're talking about Joe now post the Primo Carnera fight.
He's smiling, and he's like, but you can see.
But that's like the first time he starts really smiling is that he realized that he is good enough to measure up. Because before Carnera, nobody knew. Like the NAACP,
he handily won.
Handily won.
But it wasn't a walk in the park.
But by no means.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think so. By looking at him, he won. It looks like he's clearly cutting Primo to pieces, but Primo never stops. He never goes down. He's never. It's like fighting a bull. Yeah, okay, you're hitting the bull, you're stabbing the bull, and all this. But if you make one wrong move, that bull's going to tear you up, and that's how Primo was.
Yep.
And so, anyways, so I wanted to sort of begin today. I know we did like a kind of a celebration quote to end the last episode.
Sure.
But I don't think that quote went far enough. I think it was a quote from New York, Harlem in New York.
Okay.
I wanted to read a quote of the celebrations after the Carnera fight in Detroit.
Yeah, okay.
And I like I say, I don't think we
because
ended
there
with
were caravans of people that
went. It was the biggest
went.
thing, yeah.
I mean, they were selling bus tickets
from all the major cities in the country.
They were ride sharing to get people there to see what Joe could possibly do.
Yeah, and there was like special trains running out of Detroit.
Right,
it was just, it was the biggest thing. It was a massive
So
event.
after the fact,
so there was no radio broadcast from the fight. And so the word had to be spread. Like after the fight was over, of course, the radio broadcasts were like, "Oh, Joe won," and everything started. They actually made a video recording during the fight, which was then sold later on. That's how we have the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
But during the fight, there was no. It was like people were just waiting to hear what happened. They couldn't listen to the fight because they thought it might take away from selling tickets. And so there was actually no radio broadcast of the fight live. So they were waiting for just some random CBS radio breaking news to come across and see what happened.
Crazy early form of a blackout. So,
exactly,
right,
yeah. So this is so by this point everybody's so the fight is over, and so this is the article. This quote comes from the night of from the next day by George Stark of the Detroit News.
Okay.
So this is from June 26th, 1935. And it's a little bit of a lengthy quote, so get comfortable, folks, as you sit back and listen to something which I think is a really cool thing that paints a great picture of Detroit in the aftermath of the Joe Louis's victory over Primo Carnera. So when Joe Louis in 6 short and stinging stanzas made a molehill out of the Man Mountain from Italia, Detroit's Ethiopia went into a delirium from which it is still in the process of recovery. From Larned Street on the south to Holbrook Avenue in the north, and from John R. Street in the west to McDougal Avenue in the east, a solid sector of urban population took on an impromptu insanity. Not a mild insanity, mind you. It was a gargantuan in proportions, but glory be was it so packed with good nature that not even the fallen Carnera could have taken offense. Just as soon as our Mr. Louis went to town, so did thousands of his fellow citizens of the dark persuasion, and they made it a celebration worthwhile. Detective Lieutenant Wallace Williams, viewing St. Antoine Street with a calm, dispassionate eye just 15 minutes after Louis had been declared the victor in Yankee Stadium ring, said that St. Antoine Street had never seen anything quite like this. And Detective Williams has the background. A Negro himself, he was born less than a block from the scene of the shambles. He has been in on the most important affairs that have stirred this section of town over a period of years. But this, said Williams, is different. They're making plenty of noise, but you can't arrest anybody because they're not doing anything but just that. But they're happy, and so am I. He went on to tell about the last time his people over on the east side got so excited. It was that time Jack Johnson beat up on Jim Jeffries back in 1910. This is bigger than that, he said. Only our people are better humored. They're happier over Louis. They like him better. There was a lot of trouble, bad trouble, when Johnson won. Why, I had a battle in a saloon at St. Antoine and Wilkins that lasted an hour and a half. The detective was standing in front of the Pathfinder Lightfoot's B&C Club, meaning Bellman and Cooks, at that moment, looking delightedly at the confusion all about him. Inside the club, men and women screamed and shouted and roared for beer and something stronger. Outside the street was bedlam. The great crowd blocked traffic, stormed the headquarters of the Joe Louis Booster Club across the street. Around the corner in Big Buffalo's Chicken Shack, there was hijinks. The orchestra went hot right quick. Drummer Price Smith rolled his big bass drum out among the tables, peeled off his coat and vest, and really went to work. At the Frog Club, which is Joe Louis's own club, there was an aristocratic gathering, plenty of food and plenty of drink, with dancing thrown in. Proudest people there were in the kitchen force. They cook for Joe when he's around the club. He's a steak and chicken man, said Chef Jeff L. Herber. Especially he's a steak man. Likes him 2 inches thick. I should be sizzling his steak for him tonight. All the hot spots blazed far into the morning. That meant the Chocolate Bar, the Plantation, the Harlem, the Waiters and Bellman. All of them went riding high to town on Joe Louis's smashing rights and lefts. But the streets were mad. Motors honked, people cheered. It was a night to remember. Hastings Street on the loose is a sight as well as a sound, and this was a tribute of sight This was a tribute of sound, and this was a tribute of a thoroughfare where flourished the 2-bit crap games to one of its sons on his way to $1 million gate.
Wow.
Isn't that just freaking? Isn't that just like it paints such a great? The writing of this time is so vivid.
Well,
they paint this picture of this this incredible celebration. You know, I mean, they're just going. He's like, they're just going to town. They're like the bass drums outside. I said bass drums outside. He goes, you know, what does he say? He goes, he breaks out the bass drum. You know. Anyway, it's deep in the article. But anyways, you know, they come out and everything's just going crazy, man. They're honking horns. They're going deep into the night, you know. So, anyways, it's just a great. I wanted to start off with that because that's where it sets the stage for sort of what's going to come next. Like this begins like this summer of Joe Louis, this like love affair with this newfound, you know, superstar in the city, and so I wanted to read one more quote. This is a very quick one. This one comes from Richard Back's book, who we've cited extensively. And once again, anybody that hasn't read Joe Louis's Richard Back, his book Joe Louis: The Great Black Hope, is really missing out. Especially if you're interested in the story of Joe Louis, his full story. You know, my book focused on 1935,
right?
But his book focused on his whole life, and it's a really fantastic book. So, anyways, on Richard Back's,
there's his book.
So, anyways, So this is just a couple sentences here, and it talks about Joe himself. It's a quote from Joe Louis himself after the Carnera fight, like in the locker room. Mm-hmm. And so, and Joe it's a recollection of Joe Louis years later, remembering that night. And so, so he mentions the very first person's name is a guy named Harry Balog, and that was the ring announcer. So that's what starts off with the word Balog. So Balog directed him to the center of the ring and raised his right hand in victory. He confessed that, meaning Joe Louis confessed later on in his life, deep inside he felt a warm sense of satisfaction and joy. It was the night I remember best in all my fighting, he said. If you was ever a raggedy kid and you come to something like that night, you'd know. I don't thrill to things like some people. I only feel good. I felt the best that night. So that night against Primo Carnera, in Joe Louis's own words, I felt the best that night. This Primo Carnera fight has been so overlooked in its importance. This was the night. You know, when Joe first arrives and gets carried off the train in New York, you know, that was the moment that things, you know, that Joe Louis transformed from being just a fighter who's looking to make a buck into being an icon for for Black America. And then after this fight this is the official celebration that is the case. And Joe Louis himself has a major burden lifted off of his shoulders because now he knows he's good enough. He's just torn apart. Primo Carnera is one of the best fighters in all of boxing, and he tore him apart. So Joe, what a tremendous burden that Joe now knows that he can live up to this hope that everybody had in him. Yeah. And so he's got the confidence now, and now he can actually kind of enjoy it a little bit. And that's what I love about this one Primo Carnera fight. And nobody ever spends, the time, especially the amount of time that we've talked about with this. Yeah. It's never been talked about like this. Like even in the Joe Louis documentary by HBO, they ripped through this in like 30 seconds. This is a footnote in the story of Joe Louis. In virtually every telling of his story, it's always just a footnote. And it's
an important
way more
piece.
than a majorly important piece.
Because it's where do you cut, Yeah,
well, I know. They're trying to tell the whole story of Joe. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's good that we focus on 1935 and the events therein and how big this story was, the story of Joe Louis, and in the context of the larger 1935 season.
So these magical newspaper articles that you're reading, they were dealing with column inches, and they were very limited. It's interesting because I teach journalism. I teach young journalists in high school, and it's like I still talk about the inverted pyramid and that style of writing. So you could cut things off at the bottom, and you're only losing the less important facts because you're dealing with column inches. And they would say, okay, you only have this much room, so you got to cut that stuff off so the less important stuff goes away. But now with the internet, you have all the space you want.
Sure.
It's another click and another ad you have to look at, but with the internet you have all the space you want. And I love the luxury that we have with talking about this show, that we can take the luxury of having the time to like really give this more than 45 seconds.
Absolutely. That's what I'm trying to say.
So I'm so glad that we were able to do it. I'm so glad we were able to do it.
That's why this 1935
This is such a luxury.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why when we isolate 1935 and look at all these things from this 1 year, this you take it's like a carbon tree dating. You're taking a slice out of it and you're looking at that one ring, you're looking at that 1 year, and when you start to mine into this incredible story, you start to see this incredible, especially with Joe Louis and this, these stories that we may never, and then the learning experiences that can come out of this.
But here's the thing. You pull like other amazing players from Detroit and interesting seasons or amazing seasons, the bad boys. In Pistons basketball in the 80s and 90s, and then like the 84 Tigers, but there's no. I mean, they're good stories, they're interesting stories, and there's interesting stories.
They've all got their highlights. But could you do 47 episods on one of these seasons?
I was going to say
other sports story
woven into those. I don't think there's not the depth.
No, well, it depends on how like if you wanted to focus on each player's life story and really spend 5 episodes. You could plumb the depths of each player like this. But I'm saying, this case, we've actually kind of sped through. Like we haven't even talked about the players. The Tigers, with Tigers, we've done like 4 episodes on. We're going to go back to the Tigers.
No, I think we're getting better at this.
Yeah, I think so. But I think
we're taking more care with it.
Yeah. We're growing. We're learning how to do
We weren't sure how this was going to work and how long we were going to do it.
We ripped through the Tigers quick.
We did. We really did.
Yeah.
And
I covered the entire each World Series in a single show. Like we
almost want to renumber them and go back and add to it. But we can go back.
We'll go back to it. We got a lot to cover. We got
because a lot of these players need a lot more attention. But here we are with Joe.
So the fight's over. The people have celebrated. Joe's had his inner monologue of how great, how wonderful this whole thing was. And so one of the photos we showed last week's show too was that Joe, like how big it was when Joe returned to Detroit.
Yeah. I
mean, there was reception committees formed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if we read the quote about it, but there's like 3 different quotes where it's just like they're like. The city councilmen are all going to be there, and the mayor's going to be there, and all this. And then we have a photo with the mayor, Frank Cousins, where Joe's shaking his hands when he returns to Detroit.
Yep.
I mean, this was this was Detroit's favorite son coming home. With the entire. I mean, they were like talking about official delegations with every single. Like they were trying to decide which. Like it's almost like I've watched the show The Queen. Where there was a funeral or something, they're trying to decide exactly like which formation like the dignitaries are going to be in. That's what they were doing when Joe came back to Detroit. Like it was, I mean, they had to spend a great deal of time organizing the reception committee for like which dignitaries were going to occupy the prominent spaces. They're like, the mayor's definitely going to be in the front. We need the city council next, and then we need like the official, all these different dignitaries were there to greet him. I mean, this was a majorly big deal. So we talked about that. I wanted to mention that. But the next thing I want to talk about is Joe Louis's impact. We mentioned a little teaser at the beginning about Jesse Owens. Yeah. I have a photo to throw up on the screen, and this is a photo. And what's so great about this photo is that I had the date for this photo on the back of the image, and it was from July 24th, 1935. Joe Louis arrived in Detroit there right about July 10th. And especially since the photo that he was posed with with Frank Cousins, was dated July 10th. So he was either arrived on July 10th or somewhere thereabouts, maybe a day before. Because he's there shaking hands with, and because he was at the Carnera fight was June 25th. He certainly didn't run home the very next day. So, but from June 25th, 26th through July 10th, you could assume in that 2-week span he returned to Detroit. And so July 24th, which is really only a month after this Primo Carnera fight, Joe Louis is in an obviously staged photo. And if you're just listening to this at home, what this is a photo of a very young looking Joe Louis, a very young looking Jesse Owens, sitting at a lunch table, and they're both posing for the camera. Obviously, I mean, it's a staged photo. They're just both looking at the camera. And the question, you're looking at it and saying, why was Jesse Owens, for anybody not familiar with Jesse Owens, of course, 4 gold medals in the 1936 Olympics, famous for proving to Hitler, because the Olympics were in Berlin, showing that the Aryan supremacy was a myth. Jesse Owens was, he was a black representative of America, showing that, the story of Jesse Owens is legendary. But Jesse Owens had to get to the Olympics first.
Yeah.
In a world which was which is a racially segregated world, and there was a contention of whether Jesse Owens should be in the Olympics and this. And so the fact that he's posing, Joe Louis is massively popular at this moment, not just with Black America,
right?
But Joe, when you read these articles of Joe Louis in these newspapers, he is a beloved figure in these newspapers. They love Joe. They loved him. And so that's what I mean. So like with Jesse Owens, by bringing Jesse Owens in the same room and putting him in these newspapers, Jesse Owens was at this moment, he was a famous college star.
Right.
He was a famous, college sprinter.
Sure.
That's what he was. He was not an Olympian at this moment. He was a college
He wasn't
sprinter.
Jesse Owens yet.
No, not at all.
He wasn't,
Not at all. I mean, he was famous for what he'd broken a bunch of records in Michigan.
I mean, when you say the word,
day.
you say Jesse Owens, and there's this mystique and there's
Absolutely.
this reverence and everything to it. But when he was just a college runner,
he was a college star.
He was
that's
just
it.
he's a really good college runner.
Absolutely. He was not a national,
Right.
I mean, he might have been a little bit of a national name at that point because
Right.
he had a massive day at the University of Michigan playing for Ohio State, running for Ohio State. I think it was 4 world records he broke in an hour. I mean, it was this incredible feat, which was certainly garnered him attention.
Sure.
However, when they put him in the same room with Joe, now it's like, hey, here's another Joe Louis, but in
Changes the tone.
sprinting.
Yeah,
it's
changes the
sprinting. He's
tone.
friends with Joe. He's going to be just as lovable as Joe.
Yeah.
And so this is the beginning of Joe, the power of Joe Louis's influence on giving opportunity to other people, Americans
Right.
of color.
Well, and the American mindset at the time was just entirely different.
Well, it was totally different. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's but at the same time, like I say, I think that this is actually in America that is changing.
Yes.
that is changing, and there is,
Hopefully,
it is. They are opening up opportunities, and the fact that here's Joe Louis getting the opportunity. Now there's Jesse Owens imposing him with Joe Louis. They rub off the mystique of Joe and saying, here's another, another African American that's a man that is going to bring glory to that, to all of us. He's going to race into Berlin, and we're going to bring our superstar runner out to Berlin to go against Hitler in the area, in this Aryan supremacy thing. And so here it is. And so that's what I'm saying. So this is the beginning. Then this is not going to be by no means is this the last that Joe was going to have this kind of an impact on black American athletes. You see, and I mean, he's going to have the same. And this is this is a little bit outside the context of this of our show, but he's going to have the exact same impact on Jackie Robinson for breaking the color barrier in baseball.
Okay.
With Joe, even Jackie Robinson himself said, if it wasn't for Joe Louis, then I would have never got the opportunity that I did.
Wow.
Because the mentality after World War II with Jackie Robinson is that there was after World War II was over, Jackie Robinson baseball was still segregated after World War II. When we came back from World War II, baseball was still segregated, and so there was no black players in all of baseball. And so the mentality that was out in the press at that moment was, how is it possible that boxing, which is the most savage sport you can be, is the most progressive? Because we've had a black champion at that point. Joe Louis had been the heavyweight champion for 10 years.
Oh.
And so they're like, how can boxing be the most savage yet most progressive sport when Joe Louis has been such an incredibly great champion? We love Joe Louis. Yeah. And yet America's game, baseball, is still segregated. That mentality, that was the paradox which finally really started to break that door open and started to, allowed Jackie Robinson to be the first to break that color barrier, and then of course for the floodgates to open. Yeah. But it was the paradox created by Joe. And this is where that story of Joe doing that begins. So you can see one of the cases that we're going to make at the end of this when I summarize it all. Yeah. It all begins in 1935. So that kind of an impact, championship or no championship, right. That is a major and profound impact on the history, on the development of American sport, and you're going to be hard pressed to find anything.
American culture.
Yes, American culture, American society, everything. It all begins with Joe Louis in 1935. So that's what I'm saying. Like that case, that point right there. Any other individual season has got a lot to has got to have to measure up a big deal just for that 1 point.
Get a long
you see
road
what I'm saying?
to haul,
So that's just going to be one. Remember that, viewers, for the next time when we get to the point in a couple episodes, 2-3 episodes, when I summarize and go down the list of all the reasons why 1935 was the greatest individual season in American sport history. Remember this photo with Jesse Owens. And remember that we're going to be talking about Jackie Robinson at that moment. And remember that that's just one component of my case.
Yep.
Okay? So,
and with that, we're out of time.
No, we're not, are we?
No.
Okay, good. Okay,
good.
The time does fly in here.
We are about 35 minutes in.
Okay, we're good. We're good. I got a couple of things. Good. I know. That's like,
and with that, we're out of time. I've never said that before.
Yeah, no, you haven't. No, you got to be original.
I'm just jerking your chain.
No, that's fine. That's
but
cool.
no, because
you think that's the first time anybody's ever said something like that to me? I always get cut off for
oh, hey,
tangents.
look, this is my floor.
Yeah. No, people try to cut me off and something. Go, hey, okay, I got something I got to do. Whatever. I like to think that it wasn't, uninteresting along the ride for that little tangent, but
right. No.
So, anyways, no, we got plenty of time
what else are we hitting?
Because so the next thing that we're talking about. So Joe was going through this this summer where he's posing for photos with Jesse Owens. He's back in Detroit. He's going to Tiger games. We're going to talk about the Tigers here in a minute.
Yep.
But the next sort of big event of Joe Louis in this summer is August 7th. So a couple months after his fight with Carnera, August 7th, he's going to fight a guy named Kingfish Levinsky. That's why the title of our episode today is episode 47. We have it's Kingfish. Kingfish is like the sort of subheading of the show today.
Right.
Because he's going to fight against a guy named Kingfish Levinsky. So Kingfish Levinsky at this moment,
I got him up there training.
Is the okay, great. So he's the number 6 ranked boxer in the country, and whereas Carnera was ranked number 5 at the beginning of the year, anyways. At the beginning of the year, Carnera was number 5. Kingfish was number 6.
Okay.
And so anyways,
where was Joe at that time?
Joe was 9.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe was number 9.
Right.
Number 9 or 10 depends on what source you're looking at.
But all right, so a couple more steps down.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Joe would crack the top 10 at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
I don't have an updated for what he was at this exact moment, so I kind of go for it at the beginning of the year. Yeah.
Right.
So anyways, Kingfish Levinsky is one of the most we're going to spend more time talking about who Kingfish was than we are about the actual fight, because the fight was kind of a dud. But Joe Louis annihilates him. But spoiler alert,
I love it.
Joe Louis annihilates him. But Kingfish is a really interesting character because he is so he's one of the best fighters of it. He's fought every great fighter of his era. But he's been knocked out twice, or he hasn't been knocked out, but he's fought Carnera twice. He's fought Max Baer twice. He fought against Jack Dempsey when Jack Dempsey was trying to do like a comeback tour. So he's fought against he beat Jack Sharkey, Jack Sharkey was one-time heavyweight champion. So he's like been through he's been through the wars with all these other guys.
Okay.
He's at the top. But what's interesting about him was that he wasn't necessarily like he didn't particularly win a ton of fights. I think we're gonna read a quote here in a second, and he only got knocked out once from a fight, like knocked out one time, and that was by Max Baer, I believe. But it wasn't. But the thing that was cool about him was he was a massive personality, and he was a huge draw. In fact, some sources say that he was the number 1 draw in all of boxing.
Okay,
because he was just a fascinating individual and worth the time to spend a moment on talking about it. The name Kingfish comes from that he was from a well-known Polish family in Chicago who were a family of, they owned a very prominent like fishmonger company, like they were fish sellers.
Sure.
Fish sellers. So Kingfish, so you can imagine Kingfish, they're calling him that because he's like, of this family, he's probably like this like local, bully type, where he's like fighting other kids and winning and all this. And the look of him, the great thing is the photos of Kingfish Levinsky. If you can't see it on our show, if you're listening to the podcast, just do a Google search for Kingfish Levinsky, and you're going to see like the guy looks like your classic 30s like mug, he's built, he's cut pretty well. And he just looks like he's got like kind of a flattish nose kind of guy. Like he just looks like your pugnacious, pug or whatever from the 30s. Your kind of classic tough guy who, fighting in backroom brawls type of guy. So it's kind of easy to see how they were like, this is, he's the Kingfish of the family, like this kind of guy. So I think that's where he got his name. Was in that. I know that's where he got it from, the fact that his family is fishmongers, but
sure.
Kingfish, comes with it because he's like top of the guy. But what's also interesting is that he had a sister named Leaping Lena Levy. So Leaping Lena. So she was also this character where, so she was like in his corner, and she'd be like, "Come on, Kingfish, get in there, kick his butt," like this. She's just this crazy, outspoken corner girl who was like always like cheering him on and yelling and getting all crazy. That's why they called her Leaping Lena. So she was like, so the two of them in the ring were crazy. So it kind of leads into the quote that I wanted to read, because it does a great job in summarizing Overall, it's got a little quote from Leaping Lena, and it's got a quote from her talking about Kingfish, and it really there's actually two quotes. That's both of them by Bud Shaver of the Detroit Times, and this is just a few days before that August 7th fight. So August 4th, 1935. Bud Shaver, who is, again, one of my absolute favorite writers. He was the editor of the Detroit Times, the editor of the sports section for the Detroit Times, and he's actually the author of the article. So when he comes out writing, it's a big deal because Bud's a heavyweight in this town at this time. So talking about Kingfish Levinsky. Kingfish, as a fighter, not only ignores all the rules of boxing insanity, he reverses them. His best punch is a right swing, the destination of which is a closed secret even to the Kingfish. He perhaps more than anyone else. It was Sister Lena's cockeyed reasoning which first figured out the tremendous value of the aimlessness of King's punches. And this is her. If the king don't know where it's going, how's the other guy gonna tell? She said. To the Kingfish, this was further and conclusive proof that Lena was a mental wizard. But Lena gave him no time to wear himself out thinking it over. The Lena again. Listen, you mug. If I ever catch you aiming a punch, I'm gonna whale the tar out of you. Understand? Kingfish nodded happily. For some strange reason, he is always happy. You might knock yourself out, Lena added warmly. That might knock himself out if he thinks too much about where the punch is gonna go. That's like Lena. You see, like, you might knock yourself out, Lena added warmly. So this is the last little bit of the article here. Joe Louis's fight with King Levinsky at Chicago Wednesday night will be a severe test of the Brown Bombers' famed unmovability of facial expression. If Joe's deadpan remains frozen in the face of the antics of the incredible Kingfish and his fantastic sister manager, Leaping Lena Levy, he will qualify as the greatest poker face of all time. Perhaps the chief reason the Kingfish continues to draw hordes of customers at a thumping price is they come back again and again to see if he really is true or did they dream him. They never can be quite sure because Lena always is hopping about in the scene, which leads them to believe that it was a nightmare after all. There never was a fighter or a manager like the King and Lena, and this bureau often wonders if they exist outside the realm of fantasy until we see and hear them. Then we know they do. There is no chance of doubting. There are many tales about Levinsky, but the trouble is they are as incredible as he, and therefore no one can be brought to believe them. Like the time Ray Elvis caught him squirming uncomfortably, first on one foot and then on the other. What's the matter with you? Demanded Elvis. My feet hurt, complained the King. Inspection revealed the King had his shoes on the wrong feet. So this is
the King had his shoes.
So you see, like, they had this, like, he was a character, in character self. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't necessarily like, he's a ranked fighter. He's a decent fighter, I would think. So he's but it's just the personality. They get to see this like comedy duo basically in the ring. And he lives up to that reputation as being kind of a dimwit boxer, pug that's just going out there swinging, doesn't know what he's doing. He's swinging punches, and if he connects, you're going out. That's the idea. So this is the guy Joe's fighting for this for his 21st fight. And as I've already kind of given away, I think we have a photo of the weigh-in. We have a photo. Yeah, we have a photo of the weigh-in. We can bring that up on the screen real quick.
Yep.
So it's a cool little weigh-in.
Is Joe like really bigger? He's standing. No,
he's standing on a scale. And what's cool is if you actually look, if any of the viewer can look, if you look at Joe's shoes, he's got these great two-tone, looks like these kind of I don't know if they're sandals, but they look to me like they're these two-tone like golf shoe types or something, but they're cool looking.
Scale,
yeah. So, anyways, there's nothing fantastic. You can just kind of see the weigh-in with Joe and Kingfish. And
but
so
the Comiskey Park picture?
Yeah, I brought that up just as a quick image because the cool thing about that.
How many
photo,
people are watching that fight?
There's at Comiskey Park, which is a legendary baseball field.
It's a sea of people.
Sea of people, absolutely. And so because at
and
this,
can you imagine? Because it's the PA and the amplification back then was not like today. When you're in a stadium, you can hear everything.
Sure. You
hear the announcer everywhere, but
back in those days, the stadiums were closer too. The seats, like if you look at the difference between Comerica Park and Tiger Stadium is tremendous because the fans were way closer to the field. The bleachers were built on more of an angle so that the fans on the upper decks were actually like overlooking the field almost. Like you were like there was actually sped up so that back in the day because the amplification wasn't any better or whatever, like the acoustics and that, they brought you right up onto the field, and that's how Comiskey was. You were right up. You can see these people in the bleachers were like right there next to the ring.
Of people like. You're in a
it was
wave
condensed.
of bodies.
Absolutely. It was a condensed.
That's nuts.
This was a packed house for this. That's why it's a significant event in 35. And so they come in, this sea of people is there to watch this fight. And it's totally, and here's the thing. They weren't there very, it wasn't very long.
How quick did it go? It was like one of those Tyson pay-per-views.
Oh, dude.
30 seconds, bye.
2 minutes and 21 seconds of the first round. First round. So all these people come all the way to this fight, and they're there for 2 minutes and 21 seconds.
I remember all those Tyson fights.
They're
all
over.
Those pay-per-views.
Yeah, they're over.
And one of them was like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
it was like you paid $200 pay-per-view.
Over.
You're recording it on your Betamax.
Yeah, that's how all these people were. They all packed into
seconds.
Comiskey Park. It took them hours to park and get all situated. They're all there, and then the bell rings, and within 2 minutes, so at least he got knocked down 3 times, which is a little action in 2 minutes and 21 seconds.
Sure.
This is so. It's actually a great quote where the guy talks about how quick it was over. He goes, up and down. He goes, I got a summary. So here it is right here. This is so here it is. So this is by one of the deans of Detroit sports, H.G. Salzinger, for the Detroit News, and this is the day after the fight on August 8th, 1935. So the article title is called "Kingfish: The Easiest of All Joe Louis's Victims." So Chicago, August 8th, Kingfish Levinsky was to offer Joe Louis his big test. So they said. He, Levinsky, had fought more good men than any heavyweight in the game, and only one ever knocked him out. That was Bayer, and he had to fight Levinsky 31 rounds before he could put him away. They said that Louis had never shown that he could take a punch, and he would have to show it in this fight. Levinsky carried a right-hand wallop that had floored Loughran, Sharkey, Mickey Walker, and a number of others. What would Louis do when Levinsky landed that long, looping, crazy right-hand punch? The answers all came last night and can be summed up briefly in the following sentences. Levinsky down, Levinsky up. Levinsky down, Levinsky up. Levinsky down, Levinsky declared knocked out. All in the space of 2 minutes and 21 seconds.
Jeez.
Levinsky, the man who was to furnish Louis with the great test of his career, proved the easiest opponent he ever fought. Can Louis take it? Why keep asking the question as they have been all summer long? What does he have to take? Who in the present field can hand him anything? Levinsky's right? Well, Levinsky turned loose on, and what happened? Louis caught it high on his left shoulder and went right to work on Kingfish. He dropped him 3 times and got a technical knockout after that when the Kingfish, after starting to get up, dropped on the lower rope and sat there. Levinsky, the man who can take anything any heavyweight throws at him, could not take Louis's body punches. He went down under a left hook the first time and looked very frightened. Levinsky, during the remainder of the brief bout, kept hacking away, starry-eyed, wildly trying to escape the inevitable. Whether Louis can take it or not seems unimportant in this particular case. A more important question is, who can take Louis's punches? Levinsky, allegedly the toughest catcher among the heavyweights, could not take them, and when a man can punch as Louis can punch and box the way Louis can box, he does not have to worry about taking them. He can let his opponents do the worrying. Louis has fought 24 men since turning professional, and he has knocked out 20 of them. Levinsky became number 20 among the knockout victims. H.G. Salzinger. Yeah, so it's a nice little summary. How he goes, Levinsky up, Levinsky down, up, down. Yeah, that's what it was. It was quick to the point. He knocked him out, man. This is Louis is what they're going. They keep going. Can Louis take the punch? Oh. And they're like, the question is not that. It's whether anybody can take it from Louis. They're like, he doesn't have to take it from them. He's too good of a boxer.
Is Kingfish going to be able to pry himself off the canvas to get back up?
Well, you see, the next photo we have to show is the Magic Eye, where it shows like it's one. It's a Magic Eye. Of course, just a reminder to the people listening, a Magic Eye photo was very popular back then. It was because there was
Are they taken at the same moment, or
it was a high shutter speed camera where it would take like 10 pictures in rapid succession.
Okay.
So it was almost like showing a quick clip of a movie in your newspaper. because it would show like 8 or 10. It depended on how big how great the Magic Eye. A lot of the Magic Eyes were only like 4 or 6 photos, but this one's like a 10 shot. So you could tell that this was a really good Magic Eye camera.
Yeah.
And so I've actually seen photos of Magic Eye cameras. I've got some in the book. And on the side of the camera, it actually says Magic Eye camera on the side.
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
so the reporter would line it up. They would have been action in the fight. They would take Magic Eye photos and they would put it in the news because the newspapers were the primary vehicle of information. They had radios. They had talking pictures with sound were really came around in 1929. So the newspapers were still really the primary vehicle of information. And so the ability to show action in a newspaper was huge. And so it's a great benefit for us because I told you before, I became a Magic Eye photo collector.
Right.
That's
cool.
I've got Magic
Was this
Eye
a front
photos.
page? It says a Daily Record. It looks like
this is a Boston newspaper.
Is this a front section or is this
maybe
the front of the sports?
Probably the sports, but it could have been. It could have been. It doesn't say. I forgot if it says sports on the top or not, but it could have been front, or I'm not sure where that one exactly comes from, but off the top of my head, But the cool thing is that like I collected Magic Eyes. That's not the cool. The cool thing is that there were Magic Eyes, and I loved them so much because they showed some. And I've got Magic Eye photos for like weight throwers and weightlifters. I've got horse racing. I've got this like Magic Eye photos for everything. Yeah. And I collected them for these books, and the amount of I've got Magic Eye photos for virtually every player that I mentioned in these books. Wow. Yeah, the Lions and Red Wings not so much, but a lot of the ancillary sports stars. I've got one with Walter Hagen, the golfer.
Oh, cool.
I've got tons of them for Joe Louis. I've got I think one for every Detroit Tiger.
Wow.
So I really became like a collector of those things, and so that's why I wanted to. I always give her a chance to show a Magic Eye.
Yeah.
On the camera.
We were talking about that. But
yeah.
I love seeing.
So there's a Magic Eye of Joe hitting Kingfish, and then there's also a great sort of a large photo below it showing Kingfish sitting on the ropes and Joe just over. It's just a great shot of.
Joe, can we have a second? Can I just a second?
Well, he actually said, "I'm done. Don't let him hit it." This word, Kingfish's words during the fight were, "Don't let him hit me again, Mister." When he was talking to the referee, he said, "Don't let him hit me again, Mister." And the referee said, "This fight's over." He ended it. Yeah, so he didn't want to get hit again because he was getting destroyed by Joe. So. Anyways, yeah. So Joe dispatches Kingfish, and so the gate for this fight, as you know, is massive amounts of people. $200,000 total gate.
Right.
Joe Louis's cut was $53,000.
Should I bring up the?
Yeah, you can bring that up with the pay. Okay. How much money he made.
Oh, there you go.
Because 53. It shows the thing, if you can see it on the screen, that shows the staggering level of money that Joe has escalated since 1934 when he started. $50.
Right.
$50 he makes for his first. That's only like a year prior.
Right.
That's 1934. His first fight was July 4th. This is barely a year later.
And
he's going from $50.
And these are scratching the millions.
Yeah, now they're for the value.
For the value, they're
absolutely.
Scratching the millions, yeah.
And so, so Joe is going from literally in a single year, a $50 win, $50 purse. And that's with his managers letting him keep all of the money from his first fight.
Right.
Like he didn't take, his manager didn't take 50. He took 50, so it was like a $150 fight. No, they gave him the whole 50.
Buy your 7 siblings lunch.
Yeah, he got the full, they let him keep the entire gate from his first fight, $50.
Yeah.
And then his, maybe was it 50 or 59? I forgot.
53 on this
53, okay, for the very first fight.
So 59 on the first fight.
$50, after the taxes are taken.
Yeah,
this one here fight $53,000. Right, and this is on the heels of his Carnera fight where he would get $60,000.
Right.
So look at his totals from the year.
Yeah, 140.
Well, he's got 148. 100. So in 1930,
basically 150,000.
He's got 2 more fights left to go in 1935.
Wow.
He's already at $148,000 in 1935. In 34, what was his total? $4,000.
Yeah.
The total for the year in 1934 was $4,000. Total for the full year, and here he is with one fight at $53,000. He knocks a guy out in the first round. That's what I'm trying to say.
$3 million today. So 150,000.
Yes,
and then is worth about $3 million today.
Well, and I see that, but I wonder. It feels like it's more though. In the Great Depression money, it feels like it's like that's. I understand that the equivalent value, but that is just such And the reason why I like and I don't disagree. I understand the conversion ratio, but it feels like it was more because if a fighter got that big today, that money would be he'd be $30 million or something from a fight because that's how massively how big he was. And I like to show the money he made, not just because we're like to ooh and all over the money, but to show you how far he came in such a short amount of time. In a year, he went from $50 for a fight to 53,000.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
for a
quite a
fight that he
jump.
wins in 1 round in 2 minutes.
Jeez.
Yeah, so that's how far he's come in a single year. This is warp
So
speed.
the people that were behind him,
they all got cuts too. He got a quarter. He has a $200,000 gate. And
Jillian Black and
Yeah.
John Roxburgh. Are they still the guys
absolutely.
behind him?
Yep. The contract he signed with Jacobs.
Julian and John are still the guys behind him.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Jacobs is using his hype machine to bring in the fans, and the newspapers are all writing articles. They're still giving cuts of to the Milk Fund for Babies, the Hearst newspaper, Milk Funds for Babies, and so that's how the whole hype machine got going, was to give them a cut for all in exchange for free hype for the fights.
Yeah,
and so the hype machine is working in full tilt.
But
and Joe's living up to what he's gotta
paying
do.
off with performance.
Absolutely. So they're hyping him. And then Joe's living up to the hype, which is making it even bigger, which is making him even a bigger star.
So it's pretty exciting about Joe. The city is pumped about Joe. What else is happening right now?
So that's a perfect fade into the final little component of the show.
You're
I appreciate you. Well done, Jamie. I appreciate you picked up on the key.
Because this time
it's funny you should ask that question, Jamie.
We are almost out of time now.
Is there any chance that maybe we have a slide that we can bring up that might answer
there
your
you go,
question?
a little bit about the
There's a
Tigers,
slide.
right? So we're talking about the Tigers because the Tigers were
there's all the kinds of things going
everything
on.
going on.
Yes,
It's because
this all happening at the
happened
same time
in this 18-month time span, right?
It's 7 months. 7 month time span. That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. We might be focusing on Joe Louis now, but there's
all kinds of
it's
lunacy
all
happening in the
at the
city.
same time. So right now, what's happening is so. In the context of what we've talked about today, this is what's happening. So the Primo Carnera fight was June 25th, 1935, and where we're ending today's episode is August 8th, 1935, which is the day after the Levinsky fight. Okay, so in that stretch of time, June 25th to August 8th, this is what the Tigers are doing, because the Tigers are.
Oh, so we got the scorecard up for the Tigers.
So it's what it is the
box.
It's the box score
scores, yeah.
showing on the screen where the Tigers were on June 25th versus where they were by August 8th. So on June 25th, the Tigers are in fourth place, 6 games back in the division. Sure. In just a week or so prior, they were horrendous. They were like 5th or 6th place at that point. And so the Tigers are on June 25th, the Tigers are in 4th. Again, they went to the World Series in 1934. So 35 is looking like a tremendous letdown as of early June. And really still late June, the Tigers are in 4th place. They're not playing particularly well. But by August 8th, when the Levinsky fight ends, look at the Tigers now. First place in the division.
Jeez.
Okay, there's been a 6-game swing in the Tigers' favor. What are they? How many are they up? Does it show you where it says GB games back? And by August 8th, where are they at?
5. The next team down, New York, is 5 games back.
So now they're 5 games.
And the team after that is 9 games back.
So before
the
they were
Sox.
so in the first on June 25th they're 6 games back.
Yeah.
And on August 8th they're 5 games up.
Yeah.
That's a major swing.
That's
a huge
swing.
That means all the teams in front of them had to lose 11 games, while the Tigers won 11 on top of what all the other damage the other teams did.
Sure.
So just to give a summary of what happened in this stretch of time, the Tigers, out of the 40 games that the Tigers played from June 25th to August 8th, out of those 40 games, the Tigers won 30 of them. 30 games.
That's solid.
That's a
I don't think they won. I don't think they won. I don't think they won
75%.
30 games this whole season this year.
So here we go. So in that
ended up around 500.
of those 30 wins, there was a 10-game win streak, a 6-game win streak, a 5-game win streak, and 2 3-game win streaks.
Nice.
Right? So the Tigers are on fire. Okay? And they're not just playing good and playing a good season.
This is fire.
They are on fire, okay? At the same moment that Joe is doing all of this, that he is becoming an international superstar out of Detroit.
And there's busloads of people just pumped about sports
they're going
and about
to
the athletics
New York
and driving.
to fights. They're going to Chicago for fights. The Tigers are going through the greatest win streak. Joe's back in Detroit. Joe's a Tiger fan. G. Walker's his favorite player. Guaranteed Joe was at these games.
Oh my God, yeah.
So Joe was at the games, probably getting ovations from the fans at the same time.
Yeah.
And so
I ain't sitting in a left field box, Joe Louis.
Well, especially we're going to show in here, but there's a major attachment between Joe Louis and the Tigers. We're going to get into more of that coming up. I don't have any direct quotes from him at these games at this exact moment, but there's no doubt, especially when we show the stuff that comes after this, like Mickey Cochran is skipping Tiger games, which has never happened to Mickey, to go watch Joe Louis fight against Max Baer. Mickey and Joe are shaking hands on the field. Joe's right there. Hank Greenberg is posing with Joe Louis for photos like a month after this. I would have shown some of these photos, but I like to show stuff that happens at this exact moment,
right.
and I don't have any photos from this exact moment. But Joe Louis is guaranteed in town in Detroit during this stretch because we already showed he's shaking hands with the mayor on July 10th. He's posing for July 24th. He's posing with Jesse Owens on the 24th. So he's in Detroit, and Tigers are his favorite team. I know he was going to Tiger games in 1934. I have quotes for that, and I know he was at Tiger games in September after this. So there's no chance he's not at the Tiger games in the hottest streak that they've probably been on in 2 years.
It's like, hey, I can finally get some good tickets.
Yeah,
I'm going to the game.
Absolutely. Joe's not sitting in the outfield grass anymore. He's Joe's front row seat.
It's like, hey, I could get a couple good seats. I'm going to go.
Yeah, so anyways, and so I mentioned like the 10-game win streak, the 6-game and the 5-game and all this. But here's the thing is that if we expand the parameters a few games out from August 8th, so the Tigers on August 8th, they had won 6 straight at that point on August 8th when he beats Levinsky. And they would go on to win 9 straight. So they won 3 more after this. So if you go a little expand the parameters outside the Levinsky fight. So the Tigers, like I say, this right now is like this what it's trying to show is just the City of Champions season is now burning hot.
Because when the team is doing well, right, and it's like I go back to 84. So, the year I graduated high school and I started delivering for Domino's Pizza. But the Monahan had just purchased the Lions.
Yeah, he
year,
bought the Tigers in 84.
The Tigers.
In spring training, 84 is when they announced it.
So I'm delivering pizzas wearing a Tiger cap, and the season's just growing and rolling, and just the excitement in the city was just palpable.
Sure. Great word. Nice use of palpable.
Yeah. It was just like it was, and then the day they won, it was just crazy. I mean, just people up and down Woodward and up and down Gratiot and just out on the street, just waving it. Just people are just excited.
So you can see
up at like 16 in Van Dyke, and people are just standing on the street waving at cars,
crazy.
just excited, just excited that it happened.
So you can take that idea with the celebrations in mind and flip that back to the middle of the Great Depression.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and especially since in 1930,
and all they had, there wasn't like sit in your house and watch ESPN. It was like, it was on the radio.
But here's the thing: is what added the extra drama to the 35 season was the fact that the Tigers went all the way to the 7th game of the World Series in 1934. So they raised the expectations of the fans all the way to the heavens in 1934, took them all the way in this ride to the final game of the World Series. And then at the beginning of 1935, the Tigers looked like it was a fluke in 34.
Right.
And so their hopes were almost dashed. I mean, the Tigers started out terrible. Their best pitcher from 34, Schoolboy Rowe, was relegated to the bullpen because it was terrible in 35. And then they started to get hot. They started to get red hot, and they went from 4th place to 1st in a matter of a month. And Joe Louis, at this exact moment, is becoming the greatest boxer since Jack Dempsey. And now they're looking at him saying they're not only is the greatest fighter since Jack Dempsey, but he's one of the greatest fighter of all time.
Yep.
And now what the biggest difference is so it's not just. In this case, it's like the baseball was still segregated at this point, right?
Oh, okay.
So now it's not just like something for white Americans. That's we're having this incredible baseball season.
So
there was black fans of the Tigers too.
For Joe Louis, a black athlete, to step down on the field and shake hands,
big deal,
and be taking pictures with the Tiger players.
That's another example of what we're talking about with Joe breaking barriers.
That's such a barrier,
massively.
Massively,
and it was impromptu because Joe. Just to give you a teaser for,
and they're fun. They were probably eating steaks the day before. It's like, oh, come to the game. All right, cool. I'll be there. Hey, Joe, get down here. And then the photographers and the journalisms are like,
absolutely, get a shot with Mickey Cochran. Get a shot with Hank Greenberg. In 1936, I've got the photo from this. We'll show this in a couple episodes from now. But in 1936, Joe Louis he was in Cleveland. The Tigers were in 1936, following the World Series victory. The Tigers were in Cleveland for opening day, okay? They were opening day in Cleveland instead of in Detroit. And Joe Louis was doing something in Cleveland, so he went to a Tiger game, right? Sure. When they found out that Joe Louis was at the game, it was impromptu. It was not set up priorhand. They brought him out of the crowd, and he threw out the opening pitch on opening day of the 1936 baseball season in Cleveland. In Cleveland. Not even in Detroit. That's how big he was, is that an impromptu, like, that's the guy who's throwing out the opening pitch, not the mayor of Cleveland, not whoever else is here from Cleveland. No. Joe Louis is throwing out the first pitch. That's how big he was getting. And that's only a couple, that's, the following year, but, that's how big he's getting. And he, like I say, so, yes, he is becoming a major impact, and it's just amazing to see how, that this win streak comes right, like they're just getting red hot, just as Joe was doing his thing. And to backtrack 1 second, like I say, people, like baseball, was segregated at this point, but now this is Black Americans, Black Detroiters are also brought into the City of Champions season. This isn't just a segregated sports story where that hockey was segregated, baseball was segregated. This is Joe is part of it, and Joe brings everybody in. You see, and that's what I mean. That's the special component of this story that Joe represents, and the essential component that he represents is that he brings everybody in. You see? And so I call him in the books the great unifier, because he was what brought it all together. And that's why this story, like I say, this is a story for everyone, and he made it for that. So Joe Louis, I said before, Joe Louis, my favorite story of the 1935 season is Garwood, who is what we will get into, and I cannot wait to talk about Garwood. But my favorite athlete from 1935 is Joe Louis. Yes. Bar none. Yeah. Bar none. Mickey Cochran's my favorite Tiger. Who's my favorite Red Wing? Jamie's trick question. My favorite 1935 Red Wing, not my favorite overall.
My ankles.
Yeah, Bucko. Yeah.
Bucko. My
steak-eating Bucko's my favorite 35 Red Wing, but my favorite overall Red Wing is Abby Goodfellow.
Abby Goodfellow. Oh, yeah.
So anyway, but Joe is my favorite. Yeah, so Joe is... He's it for me. He's my favorite athlete from the story. He's what brings it all together. He's the sense. And that's why this story brought out in a movie would be the greatest sports movie of all time. It would be the. I mean, like a miniseries. Oh, it has to be a miniseries. It can't just be a single isolated movie. It has to be like a 10-part. I've already got a screenplay for a 9-part miniseries. But it can be expanded or whatever. But this would be the greatest sports story ever told. It would be the greatest sports story ever told. And that's where we're at. All
right. So, God, man, just as we unfold this, I just want to thank everybody who comes along for the ride. Ronald was making comments earlier. Catherine gave us
my sister Catherine. She's becoming the best, our number one fan. She's on every episode.
Catherine, thumbs up back to you.
She's got a City of Champions sticker on her window. She's in the Coast Guard out in
Wasn't that funny? I sent you a picture. I was like at school because I teach high school during the week. And so this year the homecoming theme is cities. And so the seniors are Detroit, and then there's like New York, Nashville, and I don't know, some other city for the other. But the seniors are Detroit, and so it was like, oh, wear your city day, So a lot of people had jerseys on. But this girl comes to my classroom, and she's wearing a Detroit City of Champions T-shirt.
She's wearing my City of Champions.
One of your City of
Champions. She bought from somebody from somewhere. Bought it from one of my displays.
I'm like, holy crap! I'm like. What? I go like, where'd you get that shirt? She goes, it's my brother's hoodie. She goes, I needed a Detroit thing, and she goes, this is cool. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
You sent me the picture. I'm like, holy crap!
I
nice.
said, that's my podcast. She's like, what are you talking about? And I played them like the opening, 1935, and they're like, oh my god. And I'm like, can I take your picture? Are you cool with me taking your picture and send it to my co-host? Because she's, oh yeah, sure. And like two of my other students were like, we got to be in the picture too. And I'm like,
oh yeah, they were totally cheesing. But it was a great shot. It was a great photo.
They're fun kids. But it was like she was wearing the shirt. It was so funny. But so the people that get excited about the show and share this experience with us, we want to just say thank you for sharing the experience with us and doing this. I just sitting here. Having a dram and
we're both got some scotch going tonight.
I know, yeah. We're running through the story. It's like Matt and I just did an episode of the Man Cave Happy Hour, and there's a Bladnoch distillery in Scotland. A couple of cats from one guy from New Zealand, another guy from Australia bought it about 5 years ago, and they're doing this thing, Pure Scott.
I love it. That's
it
great.
was
great.
nice. We talked about it.
I lived in Scotland for several years, 4 years.
It's in the lowlands,
and that's I've tried many different scotches, and I will vouch for this one. This is a really good scotch.
It's
Pure
interesting.
Scott. It's really good.
If you like scotches, this is
not heavy smoked peat flavor or anything. It's got a nice smooth flavor.
In the
It's
nose,
great.
you don't get any of the peat. You get a little bit in the flavor. They're finished.
Not a big peat fan.
They're
not
finished,
a really big smoky.
But
peat
scotches,
flavor.
that's the deal with scotch.
But some of them are heavy. The Ardbeg,
Yeah.
Ardbeg for me is almost undrinkable.
Ardbeg?
I mean, it's way too heavy. But this is as smooth as you get.
So, and that's the word. And the smooth is like the trouble word. But So anyway, I enjoyed that. Thanks to our friends from Bladnock Distillery for sending that to the studio. They sent that to the studio. What do you think?
That's a sponsor. That qualifies as a sponsor.
Don't feed the machine.
Yeah, but that's a sponsor, right? They're sponsoring the show by sending some liquor to us.
Man.
So some shows get sponsored with money and checks and stuff. We get sponsored with a bottle of scotch. What's wrong with that? We're working our way up to it.
It is. But wherever you're listening, take a second, if you would, right now. Just pause it and then like and subscribe.
Share it. If you're listening to it live on Facebook, share it for us.
Share it, retweet it, repost it, push it back out. Share. Because we're having fun. If you're having fun, we appreciate you being with us. But Charles, I appreciate.
I love doing the show.
All the work you put into this. It's
I would do this for free if I wasn't getting paid. Oh, that's right, I'm doing it for free.
We are because
I love it.
We kind of are doing this.
Yeah, we are totally. We got our sponsor. We got our Scotch sponsor.
We got a little man cave Scotch. We're good.
We're good.
All right. So, that'll do it. So next time we'll do it again. Next time, put them up.
Right on point. You nailed it, Jamie.
I know.